Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Kim Crider. I am a founding partner of Elara Nova, the Space Consultancy. We help companies and countries and organizations and agencies advance space capabilities to advance national security space. And it really is my pleasure to be here today with a phenomenal group of panel members to talk to you about this idea of one team, one fight. Support to our Space Force guardians and their families. The panel members that we have here with us today, each of them come with a passion for supporting space and supporting our Space Force guardians and their families in each of the areas where they serve. So we're going to get into it. We're going to have a really great discussion today with this group. Let me take a minute to introduce our panel members to you. So Lieutenant General retired Bruce Orville Wright is the president of the Air and Space Forces Association. He's held senior leadership positions in both the Department of Defense and defense industry, focused on responsive integration of advanced technologies into weapon systems and direct focus on warfighter requirements. He served as the vice president, cyber and S&T Lockheed Martin Government Affairs from 2008 to 2017. And has more than 34 years in the Air Force to support warfighters. He's a career fighter pilot with extensive experience in the U.S. intelligence community. He flew 65 F-16 combat missions and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross during Operation Desert Storm. Thank you for joining us, Orville.
Great to be here.
Bill Hippie Wolf, right next to me here, is a retired Air Force colonel and the president and chief executive officer of the Space Force Association. Bill is also the CEO of Wolf Consulting Group. The Wolf Consulting Group provides strategic advisory services in space and multi-domain operations. Bill served over 24 years in the Air Force, retiring in 2018. He's a career space and nuclear officer in high impact operations, staff leadership, technical program management, with peerless depth and breadth of experience in advanced space programs and joint all domain command and control. Bill is also a graduate of the United States Air Force Weapons School.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks for joining us. And then in the middle here of our panel, we have Steve Jacques, Executive Director and founder of the National Security Space Association. He brings to his role decades of experience in and intimate knowledge of the national security, space, and intelligence communities. A retired Air Force officer, Steve supported DoD and intelligence community space programs, served as the Secretary of the Air Force's Congressional Liaison for Space and S&T programs and policies, and served as the Secretary of Defense's Legislative Liaison for Intelligence, Space, and Airborne Reconnaissance policies and programs. Steve is currently a managing partner at Velos, where he routinely interacts with space and intelligence leadership in the executive branch, industry, and Congress. And in 2004, Steve co-founded the United States Geospatial Intelligence Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us,
Thank
Steve.
you, Kim. Glad to be here.
All right, so such a phenomenal group of panel members that we have, and we're all here today to recognize Space Force guardians and their families. But let's start first with a few words about the Space Force itself, still relatively young in its existence, and the criticality of space as a domain of operations. Bill, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us your perspective on the importance of the space mission to our national security and defense? And then we'll kind of go down the line and hear from the other panel members.
You bet. Thanks so much, Kim. I appreciate the question. And, I really appreciate David at America's Future Series for bringing this panel together and having the opportunity to speak on this panel with my esteemed colleagues, Bruce from AFA and Steve from NSSA. And really, it bodes to why this domain is so important. There's organizations here that are fighting with all they've got to ensure that the Americans, like-minded nations, and of course, our guardians and joint service members understand the criticality of the Space Force and the space superiority mission it's responsible for. But it's not just about a geographic operational campaign, because we can talk about that at length. It's really about how the Space Commons informs all instruments of national power. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's ever been a time in recent history where we've asked a single service to really have the ability to consecutively and continuously reach across all of those instruments and be responsible for those instruments of national power. And we can look at any of them, but I'll start with just the economy. From 2010 to 2024 today, it's doubled from 248 billion to over 480 billion. And by 2030, the economy is going to be $1 trillion. So I think there are adversaries out there that are going to try to limit the US's ability to help lead in that space economy. And we can't lead from that space economy unless we have freedom of action in the space domain. And that's what our Guardians are doing today, is ensuring that without question, and nobody wants a war that starts or extends into space. We understand that completely. But we have to be prepared as a nation to ensure those capability and resources are available to our Guardians, and then be able to ensure that we have that freedom of action in the space domain, not just with the Space Force and U.S. Space Command, but to all of our geographic combatant commands. So I commend General Saltzman for his decision to ensure that there are service components now being represented at the different geographic combatant commands. It is so critical. So again, the economy and military underpins all of that. And so when we have industry that's trying to get into space and using that innovative technology that they're using, they must assure that the military is there to support them, to ensure that freedom of action. So it's so critical. And I'm sure Orville and Steve can talk about what their perspective is, but such a unique opportunity, and it's an exciting time to be in the space domain. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much for those remarks. Those are really great to set the stage on where we want to go with this, a vital and precious domain that we absolutely have to protect, because so much of our other instruments of power, as you point out, depend upon that. And we'll talk a little bit more about collaboration in doing so here in a minute. Steve, you, I'm sure, have an interesting perspective on this as well. Space Force Guardians, Space Force organizes and trains and equips Guardians to be able to conduct operations into, through, and from that domain. And we know that many of these Guardians go and serve inside the intelligence community entities as well, which is where you spend a lot of your time. So talk to us about your perspective on the Space Force and the criticality of what space brings to our nation.
Well, I want to echo Bill's sentiments about what a privilege it is to be here with you all today. This is a great thing. I really appreciate the folks putting this event on. To me, it's really a real simple discussion. Our way of life in many ways relies on space systems that are out there. And those space systems do so many things. Our daily use of our iPhones are driven by GPS, for example, and so many things. So the quality of our life is dependent upon protecting those systems and those systems being there. But our national security relies upon space systems, both the Title 10 DoD systems as well as the intelligence community systems. Our eyes and ears from space need to be on every second of every day. There are bad actors out there, we know, and we just need to know what is going on everywhere. And so the combination of these systems protect the quality of our life and the established world's life as well. And we need to always make sure they're always there. It also informs our decision makers where there are problems and what to do about them from a security policy perspective, from a coalition perspective. Look at Ukraine, for example, is being used actively right now in times of conflict. It's also, when we do have strong systems coming from our nation and our allies from space, it serves as a good deterrent for other folks from a policy perspective as well. So it just kind of goes without saying, whether it's in peace or it's in conflict, these systems are absolutely critical to our way of life around them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Orville.
Yes, ma'am.
Give us your perspective on the criticality of space missions, space
Sure.
operations, space capabilities, and the impact that it has on our national security defense.
Well, I think, as we know, the Air and Space Forces Association is very focused on supporting the Secretary of the Air Force and his one team, one fight approach to respond to meet national security strategy, national defense strategy requirements. And as the nation invests, as Congress invests in the best possible national security posture, I think AFA aligns very well with what Bill and Steve have talked about here. And again, it's an honor to be with you all. And Kim, thanks for your leadership. And Dave, thanks for putting this together. You know, it's often said that quantity has a quality all its own. And with some 700,000 airmen involved directly in defending this nation around the world, that smaller population, if you will, that smaller set of teammates called Guardians, to reinforce what Bill and Steve said, leverage incredible deterrent credibility. And I've often said that the most lethal force for peace in the world is airmen and Guardians together. And we get the Chinese attention that way. We certainly get pacing threat attention that includes Russia and Iran and North Korea. And getting their attention means don't start a fight you can't win. And really, that's, I think, what we're all about in our support for airmen and Guardians. I think sometimes the public doesn't know. And for all of us, our job is to educate the public, including elected officials. The public doesn't know because they haven't met or they're not directly involved in what's going on from Vandenberg Space Force Station to Patrick Space Force Base. Vandenberg Space Force Base, certainly Nellis Air Force Base, where Bill went to school, and inside the NRO, inside the intelligence community. These are incredible, capable defenders of our Constitution, all held up their right hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And more, I think what you're leading, Kim, and what Bill and Steve and I can do is empower them, enable them, tell their story. And today, it's not just the story of those directly involved in the fight, deployed in place or deployed around the world, or working 24/7. It takes a family. It takes all of us supporting about 1% of the entire citizenry of the United States of America, who defend all the rest of us, ensure safety and opportunity for all the rest of us. So I love hearing Bill talk about, the reality of the dependency we have on space, and the economy connected to space. Steve, with all his experience in watching the bad guys of not turning every threat into a target. And the good news is all three of us can talk about a force, relatively small population of airmen and Guardians and their families who are very, very capable of doing that, from the employment of conventional weapons to nuclear weapons, and all that tied to a space force, space capabilities, military space capabilities that leverage commercial space capabilities, again, to be to defend this great nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Orville, you made the point. I'm going to stick with you here for a minute so we can hear your thoughts on this, and we'll come back down the line. This idea of the importance of collaboration. And to pick up on where you left off, but you can take this in a variety of different directions here. Every domain of operations depends on space, and I think we could argue that space also depends on other domains of operation. I mean, we have to be able to work as an integrated team in the joint fight. So how does collaboration across the services, General Saltzman's key line of effort, partner to win, how does collaboration across the services, intelligence community, and with international partners and industry reinforce the value of space to our nation?
Well, one approach is to go to where our expertise is here and then share it with the audience. Yesterday, and we were working together on this, but yesterday, AFA sponsored an Air and Space Warfighters in Action episode with Brigadier General Luke Cropsey. He's essentially the program executive officer for Advanced Battle Management Systems. And he did a great job of talking about how he collaborates very closely for us to have the most effective command and control, decisive, capable command and control, and information mesh and web that ensures that we can make decisions faster than the enemy. We can target, we can respond, we can marshal forces including manned and unmanned forces, all tied into space systems every day. Precision navigation and timing, the opportunities to use ground moving target indicator capabilities from space that will augment or eventually replace air breathing ground moving targeting indication capability, GMTI. Luke talked about his constant collaboration with Lieutenant General Mike Gutlein at Space Systems Command, as he also collaborates very closely with Major General Basket Cunningham at the Air Warfare Center, where Bill went to school. As he also coordinates very closely with NRO and Chris Scalise and his team at Westfields. And so I was struck by this career acquisition leader, very steeped in acquisition, making programs work, getting the taxpayer the most bang for the buck, put in that job directly by Secretary Campbell to essentially fix, get over the bridge, if you will, on making ABMS real and turning lightning bolts into real information that makes our airmen guardians decisive in combat. But I was struck by Luke's as an official. He wants to do everything possible to make sure the bad guys are absolutely defensive and don't ever want to start a fight they can't win again. So I'd use that as an example, phenomenal, women and men that are out there leading this fight. In this case, partnering directly with industry every day, where across the board we have credible industry partners that can bring in advanced technology and then do it more responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the importance of partnering with industry and partnering, from an acquisition standpoint with operations, because you can't really fulfill the needs of those operators unless you're actively partnering with them across the board. Steve, your thoughts on collaboration and what it means for space?
Wow. General Wright hit some really good points. Echo, sir. Frankly, this is such a critical topic, Kim. I mean, in large part, that's the reason why NSSA was formed in the first place. We live in a complicated world. We are a democracy. We are a nation of laws. In our space business, we have different segments of law that dictate how we do space. We have a Title 10 authority and we have a Title 50 authority, which we all deal with on a daily basis. And different people salute to different bosses, it seems like. At the end of the day, we all salute the president. But it's complicated and it's essential. The example with General Gutlein, as you mentioned, Orville, is a personification of that background in both the DoD world and the IC world, to where that kind of collaboration is essential. It truly is. And so to our point, what we try to do on the NSSA side is work with the totality of this community. And it starts at the White House. It starts with the NSC, OMB, clearly all around the Pentagon, up and down the food chain, the commands as well. And clearly in Congress, it's complicated over there as well. There are 6 committees we deal with, not 4. We deal with the intelligence communities in the House and Senate. You have to. We do the best we can to help them to collaborate amongst themselves as well. The authoritarian countries, China, I don't think they have that problem. Right. They can just beat feet and do whatever it is they want to do. They have one leader and it gets done. We are a nation of laws. So it just makes it all the more important that we have the right focus, the right understanding, and collaborating and coordinate with each other. And that includes industry. We sometimes take industry for granted. They are patriots just like everybody else is. And a lot of them are former government officials as well. The more that they talk with each other and learn from each other, the better. But I will certainly emphasize to everyone here that I think what people do know, but I think it's worth stating, as someone who spent half of his adult career in the Air Force doing nothing but space, and then the other half of my career on the industry side, and as a seasoned acquisition official, I mean, it's really, really important for our nation, our leaders to understand that this really is a one team, one fight, as you mentioned, Norman.
Yeah, for sure. Bill, your thoughts on the importance of collaboration here?
You bet. Appreciate it. And thanks, Steve and Orville, for your thoughts on that, because all of those points are extremely valid and very important. Part of it is telling that story. And General Saltzman talks about this all the time is we've got to help the Guardians tell their story. And as a space weapons officer deployed around the globe, helping to bring space capabilities into combatant commander O plans, which our Guardians are doing today, we've been having these discussions for a long time. So in terms of collaboration, we need to document the discussions and keep having the discussions and allow the discussions to evolve. So in our Space Warfighter Talk series, we're super happy to interview Guardians and talk about and document the criticality of the jobs that they're performing, just give them a platform to have that dialogue. From a international perspective, I mean, the largest global economy, India, just signed on to the Artemis Accords within the last couple of weeks. And that should serve as a model for what we need to do in terms of collaboration. Now, many nations can't support us militarily. We understand that. But from a civil international perspective, there are like-minded nations out there that share our values with regard to responsible activities in space. And so we need to highlight that education and those stories and those capabilities. We're really happy to partner with Japan ISIC and host a quad series event next week to talk about what the other nations are doing in support of space superiority mission and that responsibility. And I think there's opportunity, and I think some Space Force leaders have talked about this in the past, is I think it's time we start talking about a world space organization where multiple like-minded countries come together and start having collaborative discussions, documented collaborative discussions to talk about what this actually looks like. And I think the three organizations represented here today, plus many others who are thinking about this, help to represent those discussions. In terms of industry, oh my goodness. I mean, you both hit it, and we can't stop talking about the innovation that's taking place in industry. What we have to be cognizant of is not slowing down those innovative technologies that are happening. I mean, even right now, what space has allowed us to do in manufacturing is we are now manufacturing microchips in space using technology that when delivered back down here, and resources actually, not based on silicone, but other resources, that when delivered improve our processing capability 30 times, not 30%, 30 times capacity. So again, that type of technology and what industry relies on, and what we have to be careful of again is we can't just assume that freedom of action is always going to be there. And we must presume that there are adversary countries that want to take that capability away. Yeah. And so we have to work with all the sectors.
Absolutely. I think we're going to hear a lot from industry today. We're really going to hear about some of this really cool innovation that's going on out there that's continuing to grow. And I think you highlighted and reinforced a point that Steve made, which is really critical. This idea that collaboration is so critical, yet it's challenging. Bringing groups together, different perspectives in our democratic society, to your point, Steve, is complicated and it can be messy. But it's the source of innovation, right? It is the source of innovation and our power, where we can really pull those different perspectives, those different ideas together, and bring forward the best capabilities for our Guardians and for the space needs of our nation. And we want to continue to do that. I love the idea of a World Space Organization. That's great. Really thinking about how do we bring all of our global partners together, like-minded spacefaring nations. There are so many of them. To come together and really drive home on what we can do to continue to enhance international security space that we all so rely upon. We've been doing space for a long time. I think, we stood up the Space Force 3 years ago, but we've been doing space now for, goodness gracious, some 60 odd years, right? Our nation has been actively engaged in space. So there's a lot that we can be proud of. There's a lot of foundation there, but there's a lot to come. And now with the stand up of the Space Force and the establishment of Space Force Guardians, we want to continue to advance these critical missions and these critical capabilities. But it doesn't come without some amount of challenge. And sometimes those challenges bear right down onto our Guardians and their families. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your perspectives, panel, on the challenges that you see for our Space Force, for our Space Force guardians and their families. And Bill, let's just come back to you and we'll come back up the line.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I tell you, I think General Saltzman, our chief, said it best, and that is our biggest challenge right now is complacency. And he said it at the Space Symposium not too long ago in his keynote address, where we can't rely on the processes that we've done in the past to ensure protection for the future. We can't rely on antiquated technology to do what we know needs to be done, that our guardians need to do to ensure space superiority for our global commons. And even General Shaw at one of the Mitchell Institute talks last week talked about how we can't do things the way we've done them in the past. We have to shake the paradigm of complacency to ensure that our guardians have that innovative technology that they need to accomplish their mission. I know General Whiting just put out his Space Operations Command Strategy document. So a lot of people now are looking at his lines of effort, which he lays out very specifically, and it very clearly articulates what the guardians need to do their job. And I know General Burt is working on the operational test and training infrastructure, and General Saltzman talks about it, is the reason why we don't understand the criticality of space domain is because we've not had to fight battles. We can't refer back to a battle that's happened in space like we can in every other domain, and we can visualize it and take lessons learned from that battle. Now, we've had space skirmishes, as we know, with direct-to-send ASAT weapons, very irresponsible use of technology. But now we have to focus on the guardians and make sure they have that technological advantage without question, so that they can accomplish that mission of space superiority for our allies and partners.
Yeah, and really kind of dealing with that challenge of complacency and having the capabilities that allow them to experience the domain, to understand the threats in that domain that are constantly out there and continue to emerge. And how do you combat those in a way that's realistic, right? Using technology and innovation. We're going to hear more about that today, so that they can, in fact, address, and overcome any complacency that might hinder, their ability to stay at the edge of their seat.
Right.
Steve, what are your thoughts on how we're going to get after this?
So many
What are the
thoughts.
challenges
So many thoughts
that our guardians face?
I'll try to keep it kind of short. First of all, we should feel comfortable that we can win the fight now. We are this 60 years of investment plus dating back to the end of the Eisenhower administration, as you mentioned, Kim, is where we come from. Corona started and lots of fantastic investments that sometimes we don't think about this or talk about it, but 60 years of investment has ballooned into a fantastic commercial enterprises out there based upon all the taxpayer dollars that have invested in it for so long. And we think back to the Rumsfeld Commission of over 20 years ago, getting back to some of Bill's points, they warned the country that space is not just a peaceful domain. It's not a peaceful sanctuary. It is a military environment. And we all need to be prepared for a Pearl Harbor in space and be ready to confront that and make sure that never happens. We need to have an organization to make that happen. And that's what then, before he became Secretary Rumsfeld, the commission advocated. 9/11 kind of got in the way, but the thread never went away. Continuous support, pressure, if you will, by certain members of Congress. Mac Thornberry comes to mind. Jim Cooper. Lots of members over in Congress. The time came when that was really the time that we need to be moving. And so the Obama administration started picking up on it. Of course, the Trump administration after that made it a real reality. But it was really the thread that I think was stimulated many years prior to that. So we're in a better shape now. People are really recognizing that the space really is a military domain that needs to be protected, so that it can be used for everything in our walks of life. But we still have a lot of challenges. How much have we leveraged commercial systems? I would argue not nearly enough. Either on the ISR side or space domain awareness, you name it. And these great investments that Bill was talking to, those capabilities are coming out largely from those kind of capabilities, those companies. How operationally aligned are we with all of our allies? Lots of work to be done there. It's been rhetoric for a long time. We NSSA are going to be hosting with Space Systems Command in October a 3-day international forum to talk about these very things. We have a security apparatus that just hogties our ability to really do our own operations. And we are really appreciative that there are concerted efforts now to try to ameliorate that. But the sooner we get those kind of things taken care of, that we can actually collaborate amongst ourselves, again, the word collaborate, on the ops floors so that our warfighters can be properly informed, the better.
Yeah.
So we're doing great. There's room for improvement, which is always the case. But the fact that we have a Space Force in place and in law now is a fantastic movement forward.
Yeah, for sure. But I hear a common theme here. I mean, making sure that we continue to reinforce at the highest levels of our government the criticality of space to our national security and defense, and therefore ensuring that our Space Force guardians get the resourcing they need to be able to have the capabilities required such that they can have robust and realistic training in really combating the threat, and that they can employ those skills in the most effective way possible against those daily challenges is really critical, because we've got phenomenal guardians that have and are extremely well trained, but we want to keep them at that superior level, and ensuring that they've got great capabilities will do that, and will keep their focus on the mission. So, Orville, your thoughts on what do you see as some of the biggest challenges faced by our Space Force guardians and or their families?
Well, you talked about families. I'll shift a bit to going, if you will, on base and where our guardians fight and win, defend the nation in their responsibilities and their accountability for the most lethal weapons in the world, conventional and nuclear. And I think the public can be further educated, if you will, informed. And certainly that includes our elected leaders, that this relatively small group of highly professional men and women, supported by their families, but very interactive with their families every day, deserve our attention. They deserve our care. They deserve our support. It's not a stretch at all to look at any one of our Space Force bases or Air Force bases where we have guardians and drill down in what they do every day, every hour, and 24 hours a day. These are communities like America. There's certainly American communities in the continental United States or overseas. They're communities, great Americans, that are totally focused on defending the nation. And the pressures on them, the demands for their time, their demands for training are really beyond the comprehension, I think, of unfortunately too many of those they protect. So let's just talk about a 24/7 cycle for a family of two E3s or E4s, husband and wife. They're both guardians. Let's just think through that, both guardians. One's working a 12-hour shift. He or she comes home and the spouse goes to work for another 12-hour shift. Now they have 3 children, as they should, as they have every right to. Who takes care of those children? It's costly. And so if there's one point I would ask us all to emphasize constantly, is Congress needs to take care of the child care for our airmen and guardians. These young men and women, again, are responsible and accountable for the most lethal weapons in the world. There needs to be a whole different child care support model, and I'd make it free. When we talk about how important that is to the defense of the nation. We don't defend this nation with platforms. The technologies are incredible, whether it's a satellite or it's a B-21, and they get our attention, and they should. But it's just unbelievable to me, airmen and guardians and their families more and more, that make it all happen and make it all real.
Yeah, absolutely. So the family is the core of bringing it all together. And thank you for that. We're going to get short on time here, but I want to make sure that we are able to spend a few minutes for our audience to hear a little bit more about each of your organizations and the things that you're doing, the areas that you're focused on to enhance those capabilities that need to be in place and support for those individual guardians and the families that are so core to their ability to be effective. So come back to you,
Thank you, Kim.
Bill,
Appreciate
and
that.
hear your thoughts on SFA. Tell us about SFA.
You bet. SFA's three core functions are to inform and educate Americans and like-minded nations with regard to space about the criticality of space, and then advocate for a strong U.S. Space Force. We're so proud of the men and women who have volunteered to be part of the SFA, who really lead the programs, and many of them are our guardians, and we're really, really happy about that. So one thing is workforce development. We've got a terrible problem in this country, and we need to allow people to start their space careers as young as possible. So we partner with the Space Force Cadet Corps to get those younger kids who are excited about space but don't know necessarily how to onboard into the space domain and work with them to get them excited. And then we've created Global Space University to start a certification program so that we can start to extrapolate space professionalism and get that across the nation and even around the globe. So we've had over 600 graduates of Global Space University with certified Space Professional 1 certifications. We're really excited about the Coder League, the SFA Creator League, to allow people to code and take information and create applications that are relevant to space superiority. We're really excited about the Space Power Conference. So SFA is having the inaugural Space Power Conference to coincide with the Space Force birthday this December in Orlando, and we're really excited about that. And then finally, working with Congress to create the Legacy Guardian program. So there's going to be language in this NDAA that talks about people who were in the Air Force as space operators who can be recognized as legacy guardians because our veteran corps is extremely important as well. So this is a way to increase that veteran corps to create Space Force advocates.
That's outstanding. Now, and I heard that you and the other two associations here just recently signed an agreement to, identify ways that you can work more together. So I'm sure in many of those initiatives that you talked about, the other associations will be arm in arm with you. Orville, over to you, and then we'll wrap it up here.
Sure.
With Steve, give us we only have a few minutes left.
Sure. Just very quickly to build on what you just talked about. Very important for us to work closely together. We've known each other for a long time. We've all served and will continue to serve in the defense of our nation. And in our focus on airmen and guardians, certainly AFA has been around for a while, and we're excited to see new associations and brothers and sisters in arms stand up. For AFA, our mission remains the same: support dominant airmen and guardians. But that's a significant change in a 76-year old association. By the way, Hap Arnold, as he came out of World War II, leading the Army Air Corps, his first focus for what would be RAND was to develop a study on a world circling spaceship, and that was 1946. So AFA's been in this business for a while, but we've shifted significantly in our mission and our focus to support airmen and guardians. Our Aerospace Cyber Conference is happening 11 through 13 September. We'll have 16 going to 17,000 airmen and guardians with us at National Harbor, with a significant presence of industry, obviously led by the senior leadership of the Air Force, starting with Secretary Kendall. And that certainly is what AFA is all about, to support our airmen and guardians, starting with Secretary Kendall to those that are just entering the fight, airmen and guardians. And then we're planning for our Warfare Symposium the end of February back in Aurora, and success last year, and in a great part of the country, if you will, to invite our airmen and guardians, including the Space Operations Command, SpaceCom, to be there with us, guardians and airmen together, in professional military education opportunity, both in the fall at Aerospace Cyber and then in the spring at the Warfare Symposium. So it's an honor to be here with all of you, and constantly interact as we find more and more opportunities to keep this great nation secure.
Outstanding. Thanks. And I know you guys have some phenomenal legislative efforts too, co-joined with SFA and NSSA and similar concerns that you're wanting to raise. You mentioned the family concern earlier, and then really important educational programs for up and young and future guardians with Cyber Patriot and Stellar Explorer programs.
Thanks.
Steve, over to you. Last word, we're going to hear about
goodness.
NSSA and what you guys are focused on relative to guardians and collaborating with the other two associations here.
Well, we were formed to support the totality of our enterprise out here, for sure. Very definitely, it's about the guardians, the uniformed guardians and the civilian guardians. They do their work everywhere, and we absolutely support them. We just did a forum in Colorado Springs dedicated to workforce development of our guardians. It was a fantastic event. We had 3 general officers there. We had, you can check back our website. I won't bug the audience with all the details, but it was a fantastic day. We had 4 chiefs on a panel, space chiefs on a panel. We had younger generation guardians and officers. It was fantastic. Airmen as well. I mean, Space Force enlisted as well as officers. It was a great time. We have a think tank called the Moorman Center for Space Studies, named after the only General Tom Moorman, run by Chris Williams, who is a consummate professional in our business. We have an action-packed agenda of events that people can check out on the website. We have a legislative agenda as well. That's largely to inform and allow folks to decide if they want to take on certain areas, dealing with security, commercial systems, and things like that. But largely, we're out there working to get members and staff taking on the issues that we think are out there. So we're in this whole thing for the long haul. We're delighted to be working together with our colleagues here in both of these sister organizations, brother organizations, and just delighted to be here. And thank you for everything you've done, and to the folks here, Dave, and everybody, for making this thing happen.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Orville, AFA, Air and Space Forces Association. Thank you so much. Steve Jacques, NSSA, National Space Security Association, and Bill Wolf, Space Forces Association. Thank you all. You are, in fact, one team, one fight. Thank you for representing that here today in support of our guardians and their families.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.